Smoke-filled skies over Gaza, families in search of safety, and amid chaos, warnings of new threats that even the routes out may carry risk. In recent weeks, Gaza's authorities have issued a sharp caution to residents: beware of so-called displacement agents offering exits via unofficial routes abroad, because many may be traps or lead to permanent exile. He said, "We have become aware of networks operating in displacement and travel outside Gaza, which place our citizens in danger of exploitation or permanent transfer." The official added the warning came after a rising number of Palestinians applied to leave through non-standard channels, bypassing recognised permits and supervision. This warning comes against the backdrop of the wider humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in the Gaza Strip. Since the war erupted, large swathes of the population have been forcibly moved, displaced repeatedly, and many fear that their movements are being channeled into routes that leave them outside Gaza with little prospect of return. The authorities in Gaza stress that while legitimate medical evacuations, family reunifications and humanitarian exits continue, the unregulated routes must be treated with extreme caution. Typically, travel out of Gaza for civilians is heavily regulated. Gaza's crossings into Israel, Egypt and abroad require permits from Israeli authorities and, in many cases, coordination with international organisations. For example, humanitarian evacuations or medical referrals require official approvals. But those regulations, in effect, leave huge numbers of Gazans stranded, either unable to get permits or unwilling to wait, and so some turn to informal channels. Thousands of Gazans, the warning says, are now seeking to leave via paths that are unmonitored or semi-monitored. Some are apparently being told that they can exit Gaza through Egypt or via third countries if they pay intermediaries who claim to secure travel documents, transport or hosts abroad. But such schemes are risky. The authorities in Gaza say some of these agents may be offering only routes of no return or routes which transform a humanitarian exit into a permanent displacement. He said, "Many of our citizens believe they are escaping the war and will return home later. Instead, they are placed in limbo outside Gaza, away from family, without guarantee of return." The caution comes alongside appeals from Gazan officials for staying within the formal channels and for any citizen who exits to secure assurances of return and legal status. This is not simply a border story. It reflects the deeper fear that the war and blockade are creating not just temporary flight, but permanent reshaping of Gaza's population. International observers and humanitarian organisations have raised similar alarms. They report that mass displacement orders from the Israeli military have moved hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, that the network of safe zones in southern Gaza is increasingly crumbling, and that exits abroad may become another vector for permanent displacement. For many civilians in Gaza, the driving force is survival. Bombardments, the destruction of homes, loss of livelihoods, fuel shortages, lack of medical access all push families toward the decision to leave. The formal permit process under Israeli control is slow, inequitable and often denies applications, especially for young men, due to security screening. Many simply cannot wait. They see a route proposed, however informal, and take the leap. An aid worker described the scene earlier this year. Thousands queued at the regulatory crossing points, with large numbers turned away or left waiting indefinitely. Some of those turned away start hearing of private exits, but those exits seldom include the protections that accompany structured humanitarian travel. Without return guarantees, without known host countries, they risk being stranded. The authorities in Gaza are now pointing to displacement agents, intermediaries who promise exit through unofficial means, arrange transport, paperwork or contacts abroad. Their offer appears attractive in a crushed economy, but the risks include abandonment abroad, undocumented status, trafficking, inability to return, extortion or loss of family links. The warning emphasises that these exits may not be voluntary in the sense of returning. While leaves are often framed as short-term or for safe host countries. Insiders say many of those who travel via these routes find themselves unable to maintain or exercise the right of return. In Gaza's context, where the right of return is a core issue for families displaced inside and outside the enclave, this is especially troubling. He said, "We urge all our citizens, do not be deceived by promises of exit. Keep your documentation, preserve your legal rights, and insist on return rights. The message is direct. Exit may look like an escape, but it might also be a one-way ticket." If even a small fraction of Gazans exit via informal routes and do not return, the demographics of the enclave could shift significantly. That carries long-term consequences: family networks broken, labour force disrupted, dependency on remittances from abroad. Some officials believe that the very availability of such routes may serve a strategic purpose, reducing the pressure on the enclave by promoting out-migration. Observers note that the combination of repeated evacuations, shrinking safe space and limited return options are already reshaping Gaza. According to OCHA, Gaza's civilian population has been subject to mass displacement orders repeatedly. The introduction of unregulated exits is now adding another dimension, not just internal displacement, but external migration under duress or without full safeguards. Despite this warning, formal exits for some Gazans remain in medical referrals to outside hospitals, family visits, student travel and humanitarian evacuations. These are usually processed via the border crossings such as the Erez crossing or via Egypt at the Rafah crossing south. But even these exits are heavily monitored, often limited to the most vulnerable, and carry lengthy processing and security checks. The authority in Gaza insists that anyone considering exit should use these channels where possible, secure written return authorizations, keep copies of documents, and avoid paying upfront large sums to intermediaries. One Gazan family, displaced several times inside the enclave, told relief workers they were offered an exit via Egypt-based agent who promised a job and temporary stay abroad. They paid thousands of dollars, left via a desert route, only to find themselves in a third country, undocumented and unable to send money back. Their return home remains uncertain. Others have told of agents who organised travel and host country assurances but vanished once payment was made, leaving the traveller isolated. The humanitarian community says these are not yet systematically documented. Many expect more cases will surface as host countries struggle to absorb new arrivals from Gaza. There is also concern for children, elderly and disabled travellers who may be particularly vulnerable to exploitation. Under international humanitarian law, displacement of civilians must be voluntary, temporary and safe, with the right of return guaranteed. Mass and forced displacement or the transfer of an occupied population may constitute a violation of international law. With this in mind, officials in Gaza caution that the emergence of agents arranging external exits looks less like purely voluntary travel and more like displacement by design. In a setting where more than 85% of Gaza's population was at one point subject to evacuation orders and where return space is shrinking steadily, the risk that exit becomes exile is real. At this juncture, the warnings being issued are not only about dishonest intermediaries, but about structural shifts in the war zone. Gazan authorities say they are investigating reports of unscrupulous agents, freezing local firms that advertise exit services and issuing public alerts. They are also trying to coordinate with humanitarian agencies to expand registered exit programs, though these too remain constrained by border controls, security checks and host country willingness. One senior official said they are compiling a registry of all Gazans who have exited via informal routes to assess return prospects and any obstacles. He acknowledged that many people leave in desperation, but said the longer they stay abroad without legal status or family links, the harder it is to return. Based on the warning issued, travellers and families in Gaza are advised to stick to recognised exit channels, medical referral, humanitarian permit, family visits and keep documentation of permits and exit entry stamps. Avoid paying large upfront fees to intermediaries promising safe exit abroad without formal host country arrangements. Insist on written assurances of return and legal status in country of arrival. Notify family and coordinate arrival details. Recognize that an informal departure may end up being a long-term or permanent displacement with few protections. Remain aware that crossing through unofficial routes may expose a person to human trafficking, loss of assets, or inability to return home. Concluding note: in the midst of a brutal war where survival is the main objective, the decision to leave Gaza seems straightforward. But as these warnings show, even the exit can carry new forms of risk: loss of home, broken family ties, legal limbo. As one official put it, the difference between exit and displacement lies in one factor: the right to return. He said, "We ask our people, do not trade your future for a route that may cost you your homeland. In a territory where homeland is everything, that warning may prove as urgent as any air raid siren."